Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl Podcast, a 3-time award-winning show that aims to motivate and inspire you while increasing the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. If you're passionate about adventure, challenge and learning from women who have overcome obstacles and achieved remarkable things, then this is the podcast for you. Every Tuesday at 7 a.m, new episodes go live featuring incredible women who share their stories, insights and tips to help you achieve your dreams and goals. You can support the Tough Girl mission by signing up as a patron. Visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Keep listening until the very end as I share more information about what's going on with me with Tough Girl Challenges, give shout outs and recommend other Tough Girl Podcast episodes. More information can be found at toughgirlchallenges.com.
My name is Risa, and I am based in Colorado, USA. By day, I'm a Gestalt practitioner, which is I'd say more of a holistic and experiential approach to coaching. I'm also a speaker, an author, and a patient advocate. I love all kinds of adventure and experiencing other cultures and learning. I can't get enough of learning and constant and never ending improvement.
Oh, that sounds like Tony Robbins. Can I?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Have you ever attended any of his seminars?
I have not attended any of his seminars, but one of my mentors, a lot of her influence came from Tony Robbins, and he also shares the same disease that I have.
Interesting about, we'll come on to your disease in a little bit, but I'd love to go back to childhood because there's a few things that you mentioned, just sort of sharing that, you've got this love for learning and for adventure and, you're living in Colorado. So where did you grow up? What were you like when you were younger?
I actually grew up in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. Somewhat of a dysfunctional household. I guess I don't really know what functional means anymore today, but I remember one of my outlets was just going on adventures and taking myself on adventures. And I wasn't the type of girl who was playing with dolls. I was out like digging things up out of the ground, playing in the creek, reflecting back on my childhood. What I remember was this one time my dad gave me a buffalo head nickel. It's an old coin that used to be distributed in the US here. And I remember being fascinated by it. And that really sparked my interest in past cultures, the past history, archaeology. So I remember I was just always out riding my bike, getting dirty, and just always being fascinated and interested in the world and other people. And, of course, as a child, I didn't have those. I wasn't thinking that, but reflecting back, that's really who I was as a kid.
What does adventure mean to you now? Has it changed over the years?
I think in some ways it's the same. And I think in some ways it's probably different, perhaps based on my physical capabilities. But again, adventure to me is learning and experiencing something new. And I used to be extremely rugged as a person, a lot of mountain climbing and triathlons and things like that. And physically, I'm not capable of those things anymore, but perhaps I can do them at different degrees. So yeah, so maybe in some ways that's how it's changed, but in the ways it's the same is that curiosity for like still learning and experiencing new things.
Should we talk a little bit about why and how things have changed for you and what happened there? You mentioned that you've got a pituitary disease, a sort of a very rare disease. Do you want to share a little bit more about the diagnosis, finding this out, and how it's impacted on your life?
Yes. So I'll give you some years just to kind of create a little bit of a timeline, but I'd say around 2011, just after I completed my first Ironman race, I started noticing changes in my body. Some of these changes were like weight gain and joint pain and some other physical symptoms that didn't make sense, but I always found a way to explain them away. It's age. It's my heritage. It's on and on. There was always a reason, like, oh, I'm overtraining or something. Fast forward 7 years, I was training for another Ironman race, and it was really, really hard. I actually fired 2 coaches because I thought they were prescribing me poorly written training schedules, and I was never recovering. I couldn't keep the weight off, even though I was very stringent with my diet and my training regimen. And there was other things. I barely made it through the race, barely. And I couldn't recover from that. And I had headaches that were so severe. Like I was maybe sleeping 2 hours a night with the help of some CBD. I finally went to see a doctor and I said, something's wrong. There's these weird things going on. I can't get rid of these headaches. And my doctor kept saying, no, you're an athlete. You're fine. I'm not worried. Your blood works fine. And I said, I want to get an MRI of my brain. No. I don't think you need one. And they're expensive. I said, no, I really want one. And she dismissed me one more time. And then I don't know if it was divine intervention, but something was like, nope, get the MRI. And I said, order me the MRI. I'm not asking. And a week later, I got an email from her saying, you have an enlarged pituitary, go see an endocrinologist. I had no idea what an endocrinologist was. I had no idea what an enlarged pituitary was. And before I know it, I'm sitting in the endocrinologist's office and I'm looking at this massive tumor crammed in my what's called bacilla turcica in the brain cavity between the eyeballs, and it houses the pituitary gland, and it's massive. And she's like, this has to come out. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I don't have time for this. I am a busy overachiever. I keep a full schedule. I don't have time. And she's like, this has to come out. Before I knew it, I'm looking at brain surgery. And then she says, oh, and one other thing. This massive tumor crammed in your head is also causing a rare disease called acromegaly. I'm like, what? First of all, that's the stupidest name I ever heard for a disease. And it comes from Latin terms. But second of all, I'm just like, wait a minute, isn't brain surgery enough? And now I have this disease. But it was like this mix of relief. Like, oh my gosh, I knew for 7-8 years something was wrong in my body. And I finally had this validation. So in my mind, I'm like, great, let's get this tumor out and get rid of this disease so I can be on my way. Well, that's not how it goes. And that's not what happened.
What an adjustment to even go through. Doing your Ironman, doing your training, getting this email, this letter, and then suddenly you're in a doctor's surgery and it's like brain surgery. Oh my God. I think I've probably watched like too much of Grey's Anatomy.
Right.
How did you go about processing?
It felt very surreal. And because of my mindset, like it was just this thing I had to just, okay, I just have to do this and get it done so I can move on with my life. Like I said, and I talk a lot about this in my book, but like I said, I was an overachiever. I was constantly reaching for the next thing, and wanting to do better and be better constantly. And initially in my mind, I was like, okay, well, can we just get this done? And I remember I had to wait 3 agonizing months for surgery. And then I found out 3 months after that, they couldn't get the entire tumor. Essentially, what this disease does, I don't want to make it too complicated, but it destroys the body over time. It dumps excessive amounts of growth hormone into the body over time. So everything continues to grow, all your organs, your bones, your tissues, and it's debilitating. So if you think about all your joints, anywhere from your finger joints to your knees, to your hips, to your jaw, to your back, everything's growing. So things are fitting together very oddly, and they create bone spurs and then you have tissues and then organ growth. And a lot of people with this disease pass away from an enlarged heart. So it has to somehow be regulated and managed. So now I was facing either radiation treatment or being on medication for the rest of my life. And I was essentially somewhat of a purist. I don't want to, that's a strong term, but like I didn't even take ibuprofen. I didn't even take painkillers. Like I never even went to a doctor really. Like I was just a healthy eater and very conscious of, what I put into my body. And so now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, so I have to choose radiation or toxic medicine. Like there's these two poisons. Like I felt like, how does anyone even make this decision? I feel like myself getting emotional even thinking about it now. I'm just like, wait, what? Like, so now I have all this going on and I got to be pumped with all this crap and then it's not done. So now I have to like choose which poison I want to contribute to the destruction of my physical body. It freaking sucked.
Did you have any support at this time? Family or friends? Were there people in your life? Was there a support group that, that you could talk this out with?
It's interesting. I'm guessing a lot of anyone out there listening who's faced some kind of illness or even challenging circumstance, it could feel like the loneliest place in the world. So I had people supporting me, but no one fully understood what I was facing, because, for example, I battled orthorexia in my 20s, and that's where you're extremely conscious of what you put into your body in an excessive way. So that came creeping back. And people are like, oh, just get of course, no brainer, get the radiation treatment, things like that. And internally there was this battle going on inside me of like, I have to betray my body. I have tears coming up thinking about it. Like I have to betray my body and there's no good decision.
Oh, I wish I could give you a hug. Like, just such a difficult time. Were you able to exercise during that time? This is, you've obviously spent so many years doing Ironman. You've been running and cycling and swimming and using the outdoors and going on adventures and doing challenges and using that probably as, getting your endorphins, making you feel good. Were you able to do that at that time? Because you obviously, you mentioned about feeling just so tired and with your headaches and, not being able to, were you still able to get outside to a certain extent or was that just off the cards at this point?
It was definitely off the cards. The headaches were so severe that they made me nauseous constantly. So I wasn't even leaving the house. I remember, and this was over the holidays. And part of the reason my surgery was delayed because all the doctors, they leave for the month of December for the holidays. And so nobody's working. And so my husband, actually, his mother was dying from cancer. And so he had to go be with her on his own. And I had to stay home. Like I couldn't, I was so sick and so much pain. And so I wasn't doing much of anything. And then, but again, my mindset was, okay, as soon as I have this surgery, I'll just get back to life. I had a 250-mile bike tour lined up for 6 weeks after brain surgery. And I remember saying to my neurosurgeon, okay, well, he's like, okay, so no driving, no this, no that, following surgery for about 30 days. And I said, oh, well, I have a 250-mile bike tour and, 6 weeks following surgery. And he looked at me like he was confused, almost like he thought I was messing with him. And he's like, yeah, you're going to have to cancel that. And my mindset was like, well, I'll show you. But I quickly learned, I think it took me 10 months before I was able to get back on my bike. And there was just so much that came with this following and recovery. And then the entire tumor wasn't gone. And now I have this disease. And now I'm dealing with all these different medications and then 6 weeks of radiation treatment. And it was a big struggle. It was a big struggle. And I remember making a conscious decision about 7 months after surgery. I could still barely get off the couch. And I remember saying, this is not how I want to live. And so that's the moment I decided I was going to ride my bike from Canada to Mexico down the Pacific coast.
I feel like fist pumping the air, like, yes, I can. I mean, you set the scene so well, about the surgeries that you've been through, the radiation, how you're feeling, being on the couch, then mentally, making this decision, this is not how I want to live. But actually, there can be a difference between that mental ideas or mental motivation. Like, so what I'm trying to get at is that having the idea and mentally wanting to do this can be very different from actually putting the idea into practice, especially when you've just had, a brain operation. Where did you start? How did you start? What was the process?
I looked back at kind of my history of, well, my adventurous life and all the things I loved doing. And I remembered that feeling of what it would get me. It gets you that feeling of, it's different for everyone, but for me, it was this feeling of accomplishment or like elation, or like you said, all the endorphins and, oxytocin and what serotonin, all those exercise feel goods that come through your body. And I was like, I know what this will get me. And that was my driving force, is like, I know what this will get me if I do this. And I'm also all of a sudden looking at, okay, my life's no longer going to be the same. So what am I going to make of it? What am I going to do with this life? This one precious, big, beautiful life. And, the bucket list came out and this was on it. Actually, I initially wanted to ride my bike coast to coast, but then I found the Pacific Coast route and I was like, that's the one. I initially started off painting. I still couldn't barely get to the mailbox and back. And so I started painting, and that became a real outlet for me. It got me off the couch, and I started gifting people with my art, and now I sell it worldwide. And that was kind of the start of it. I had to ask myself, okay, instead of focusing on what I can't do, so clearly I can't go out and ride 100 miles anymore, or even get on my bike trainer. But what can I do? Well, I love being creative. So I'm gonna start painting. We'll see where that leads. And I just started, instead of focusing on what I couldn't do, I started asking myself each day, well, what can I do? Some mornings it was like, okay, well, what can I do today? Well, I can brush my teeth. Great. Check. Got that done. Well, what can I do now? Well, I think I could get out of these ratty sweatpants and get dressed. It was small steps. It's one thing, and I stopped judging myself on what and she kind of blocked out the noise of other people, because visibly I looked like the same person. And I was this powerhouse. I was this dynamo. Like I said, I was this obnoxious overachiever. And so physically I looked the same to everyone. And I had to really block out other people's expectations of me. And not that they were doing it on purpose, but it just goes back to that feeling of, it's a lonely place because people don't understand actually what's going on. And I remember a couple of years later, I got back to the CrossFit gym, and I was with all the same coaches and people, and they're like, oh my gosh, she's one of the strongest people in our gym. And I had to be like, not anymore. And it took them a while. They kept trying to push me. Oh, you can do more than that. You can lift more than that. I physically couldn't. It took them a while to kind of understand, oh, whoa, this is where she's at now. And so there's really is this battle of trying to live up to what everyone has come to know you know who you are to be, and kind of redefining for everyone. No, this is who I am. Love it or leave it. Like, this is who I am now. And it's not the same person. And I actually love me a heck of a lot better now. I'm one of those people where this truly was a gift. It's made me such a better person.
That's so lovely to hear. Like, I mean, So I suppose one of the words that I've written down is acceptance, because, you know, when you talked about, I suppose what you've been talking about is almost like the identity piece of, you know, how not only that you identify with yourself, but how other people look at you. And you're going back into that CrossFit gym, and then they're like, no, you can push it hard. And they might not know what has happened when you haven't seen them, but you know yourself now. You've accepted, you know, where you are and what your levels are, and what you can do to work with your body and the disease that you're currently working with. Let's talk about the Pacific Coast Highway. I mean, it's a beast. 1,845 miles. You weren't riding this alone though. You were doing this as part of a group. Do you want to just share a little bit more about it?
Yes. So I signed up for a semi-supported tour. So I thought, okay, if I have a van that I share with like 9 other people that transports my gear from point A to point B each day, that'll take like a stress off of me. I don't have to worry where I'm going to pitch my tent each night. That's taken care of for me. I don't have to worry about medications and, you know, things like that. And if I do need backup, it was made very clear to us, like they are not our SAG support. And so for people who don't know what SAG is, it's support and gear. So they're not there to pick us up if we just don't feel like riding. We have to get ourselves from point A to point B each day. But I was thinking, if I have the stress taken off of me of my gear being transported, that'll be fantastic. And I just have to ride each day and get my body through it each day. And I can do it on my own. I could do this. It was going to be a soul healing journey, and I could do it on my own. I don't have to ride with other people. This is my ride, and I don't have to be friends with anybody. I just remember showing up the first day, and there's egos and uncertainty. And I'm just like, oh God, what did I do? I should have just done this by myself. And then there were issues with my medication along the way, which was a pain in the butt. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this would have been a lot easier to do on my own. Like, my book is based on this journey. And so I don't want to share too much, but the story changes. The story changes.
Ooh. So you have written about the book. It's called The Road Unpaved, Border to Border with a Brain Tumor and a Bike. So I'll try and be delicate with my questions so that we don't sort of spoil it too much for people. But I suppose reflecting back on the ride, what were some of those magical moments that you experienced?
There were so many. I mean, I don't even know where to pick. I think unexpected connections surprised me. And I learned, it's interesting when we create a plan for ourselves and we try to control situations or outcomes, and the universe has an entirely different plan for you. And it ends up being way better anyways. And so I think this was kind of one of those scenarios. And it taught me to really open myself up and to be open to what's possible, to be open to, I guess, letting go of like limiting beliefs, or, you know, oftentimes we put our own constraints on ourselves. And as much as those are our own doing, they can be our own undoing. And yeah, so it was a massive learning experience for me, which goes back to my definition of adventure for sure. And yeah, it forced me to be present and really aware of being in the moment.
You've named your brain tumor Bubba.
Yeah. Yes.
Was there a purpose or a reason for naming your brain tumor?
Yes. I actually thought it was ridiculous at first. My mentor is, she works in the Gestalt therapy realm, and the same one that has a lot of Tony Robbins influence. And she said, hey, you know, instead of being angry at your body, because I would just complain, like, why does this happen to me and my body? And I always take such good care of it. And now it's doing this. And she would be like, hey, instead of like yelling at your body and being hard on it, like, what if you named your tumor? And what if you were kind to your body? And what if you told your tumor, like, hey, you served your purpose, but it's time to retire now? And, and if you get into kind of like the Louise Hay stuff with heal your body and stuff, the pituitary is the control center of the body. And she talks about how in your life you're either being controlled or you have need for control, which was very much my situation, which my mentor knew about. So she was like, what if you talk to your tumor and say, hey, I'm letting go of control. I'm surrendering and I don't need you anymore. Go retire in the Caribbean, tumor, and who I eventually named Bubba. And it actually added a lot of humor to my situation, which I love. I love adding humor. It can change perspective, even in some dark moments. And so it became this, everyone got to know Bubba. We created this whole story and character around him about him retiring and leaving my body. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we found out he wasn't ready for full retirement 3 months following surgery. And so he decided I said, well, I'm doing this life and I'm doing it better and better. So you could either do it with me or you could do it against me. And so he became a big part of my journey down the Pacific coast.
What is your prognosis with Bubba and your disease?
So I did proceed with radiation treatment in hopes it would shrink the tumor. I get an annual MRI to see if there's any changes to the tumor. Oftentimes they grow back. As of last year, my tumor was stable. It hasn't shrunk, but it hasn't grown. So there's a positive and negative there. So I have to be on medication to control what the tumor is doing. And that's that excessive growth hormone that I've talked about. So far, I'm on my 5th medication, and so far nothing's working. And medications cause their own, they're pretty toxic in themselves. They have their own significant side effects, along with the radiation treatment has side effects, especially as time goes on. So it's uncertain. And that's how I live my life, is with this realization of the uncertainty of my future. And so I want to live it big and I want to live it now.
For many people, getting a health diagnosis like you've had, or being in an accident or something happening to a friend or a loved one, it can be a massive wake up call, almost how COVID was for people to actually stop and reflect and think about their life and the life that they are living. And are they on the right path? Are they doing what they want to do? Or are they just existing? As a result of this massive change in your life and this significant wake up call where you are living now with uncertainty, did you change much about your life?
Yes, I did. I ended up getting divorced after an 18-year marriage. I started letting go of people and things in my life that I want to say that like no longer felt in alignment with me, but like, those people or things that just don't feel good after you've encountered them. Started letting things like that go. I pulled out this list of things I've always wanted to do or try, and I keep adding to it. And so, yes, I started signing up for all kinds of classes. And, like I said, one of those things I love is learning. So all different types of dance classes, things that scare the heck out of me, like improv class scares me. I took a dominatrix class, which I still get bashful talking about because people are like, you did what? But I was curious and I was very bashful about it. And I went indoor skydiving and I took boxing and axe throwing. And hip hop dance and Bollywood, and I go to the theater, and I mean, you name it. I am checking all the things off the list I've wanted to ever do or try. And in the past, I would have never done. I was definitely living within constraints. And I'm really also stepping more into who I want to be. I'm actually very colorful and compassionate and kind and loving and giving. Whereas before I kind of always kept myself very contained and reserved and quiet and very dim. And now I'm like unapologetic. I like to say I'm unpolished, unapologetic, and unleashed.
In a weird way, it's almost like letting color back into your life and not dimming your light anymore to fit other people's expectations of what or who you should be. I love, by the way, thank you for sharing that, because actually, you know, more people should do things like this. Try it. I mean, book a dominatrix class.
Oh, yeah, and I could laugh about it, and it's so funny. And when I tell my friends that, we laugh, like but I'm so glad I tried it. So glad I did it. And I think you know this. I just completed the Camino Frances in northern Spain, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I wanted to quit so many times, almost every day. And I would just get back on my bike every morning, and I feel emotional about it because I wanted to just quit so bad. And I kept getting up. I kept getting up, getting in the saddle and doing it. And now I did it. I did it, and I checked it off the list. And it was just a matter of each day getting back on my bike. That just felt simple to me. Well, I could do this today in this moment. And then it led to that final outcome. So I have a lot of gratitude for that.
Why did you choose the Camino de Santiago? Was there a calling? Was it something to do, you know, many people do it for many different reasons, and it can be a very sort of spiritual pilgrimage. What was your reason for doing it?
There's several reasons to this answer, but they're doing a lot of research in Spain for acromegaly and pituitary diseases. And I knew I'd be writing a second book, and a lot of people have heard about the Camino, and I thought, well, maybe I should do something that people have heard of. You know, it's been romanticized. You know, there's that movie about it and lots of books about it. And maybe it'll be actually more doable for me physically. I even had this dreamy idea about it. You know, I thought I'd just be like pedaling through the lavender fields. It would just be lovely, you know, with my flower basket. And so there was all these reasons of why the Camino. And then I got there, and it wasn't anything I had imagined it would be.
Oh, I'm having a little giggle just because I walked the Camino from Saint Jean Pierre de Port to Santiago de Compostela, and I think one of the things that shocked me was literally like the snoring. Oh my God, the sleep deprivation and the snore. And I just felt it was one of those things that nobody ever seemed to talk about. And logically, it makes sense because you're sleeping in a room with like 40 or 20, 40, however many hundreds of people or whatever. And it's just almost like you said, it's been romanticized to this massive degree that you're going to be going through lavender fields. And then the reality is there's like hundreds of pilgrims. And if you don't necessarily, not that I don't like people, but I have a certain bubble space that I like to be kept around me. And sometimes I like maybe probably more like wilderness hiking. I mean, I still really enjoy Caminos. There's a lot of positives to it. What was that experience like for you then? Just maybe talk through some of the moments that stand out, the good, the bad, the moments that make you laugh, that make you cry.
So I actually biked it. So I took 15 days to bike from Roncesvalles, so just over the border from Saint Jean Pierre to Santiago. And there's not a lot of cyclists on it. I didn't see one other solo woman cycling it. And so I was alone much of the time. I thought I would connect with other pilgrims, and it wasn't the case at all. And again, and I thought it would be this soul healing journey. And if anything, on some level, it was a spiritual journey because it forced me to be very present and focused. But man, I remember the first day I was exhausted from some jet lag, and the trail was really difficult and challenging and muddy and gnarly. And I didn't sleep well. And at first they couldn't find my bike. And then I lost my phone somewhere on the path. But then there was this miracle moment where 20 minutes later, this hiker comes out of the woods, and I asked him, "Oh, did you find a phone by any chance?" After I'd been bawling my eyes out because that was my lifeline. And I expected him to say no. And he said, "Yes, I did." And he handed me my phone. And I don't understand Spanish. I took French in school. And I kept trying to learn, but with some of my memory and cognitive issues now, I can't retain things as well. And I just feel like I was always being yelled at by Spanish people, and I was always doing something wrong. So I just felt like I was failing miserably on the first day. And I was ready to just quit. I had a massive meltdown by the time I got to Pamplona, and I was ready to quit. And I called a friend in the States. And maybe for some people, like, well, then why didn't you just quit? But like, to me, that, like, again, my mindset, I'm like, well, but that's not what I do. Like, that's not what Risa does. She just, even sometimes to her detriment, she won't give up. She's like, it'll kill her first before she gives up. And I just remember having this meltdown. And then I just remember picking myself up and being like, okay, well, what's the next plan? What do I need to do to make this work? So I devised a new plan for the next day, and then some pieces started falling together. And then I met another cyclist, a fella from the UK, and we rode together for like 4 days, and then we kind of split off. And I found moments of joy, and even though the whole time I physically struggled. And what I come to realize is it's all a part of being alive. Even those moments we struggle in, those challenging, those hard moments, those moments you want to quit, it's all a part of being alive. And I want to be alive. If it means I can't be happy and joyful and things are easeful all the time, I still want all the other stuff too, because it means being alive. I want to be alive. So I want all of it.
But it's also about being realistic about adventures and challenges. And this is what I try and get across in my social media is it is not always good. It's not always sunshine. It's not always roses. The people aren't always nice. The ground, the terrain, you will get lost. Sometimes you can't eat the food. You know, that there's language barriers. There are challenges and issues and frustrations and struggles. And it is just 100% a part of the journey.
Yes.
And it's how you handle those frustrations and challenges, because many people, they're like, well, that's it. I'm done. I quit. I've had enough. Or people are like you who've got that mindset of like, okay, I need to figure out a different plan. Okay. And then, you know, you keep on persevering, and then you meet a few other people, and then you're riding with, you know, a nice British bloke for 4 days or whatever. I mean, randomly when you said, you know, especially like on the first day, you felt like that you were failing miserably. I had the exact same feeling on my first Camino, because I wanted to walk over the Alps. And for some reason, I remember the junction, I turned right instead of going straight on, because I'd looked at the word and to avoid the lower route. And then I thought that was the route I needed to take, and ended up taking the wrong route. And yeah, I was like, I'm walking on the road. I don't seem to be like, what is going? And then I was just like, oh my God, I've messed up. I've messed up my whole Camino. I've done it wrong. I feel like a failure. I want to go back and start again. It is uncomfortable and frustrating to go through,
Yes.
through that. What's the next adventure?
I have a big list, and I'm not sure. I've always wanted to spend time in the Dolomites, and I've wanted to go down to Patagonia, and yeah, there's so many. I'm not sure yet. I think I'm still recovering from the Camino.
Does it take it out of you quite a lot physically? So are we talking sort of like months to recover?
Yes, it can. But what I find is when I'm living in alignment to like my goals and my dreams and things I'm really passionate about or that light me up, it's almost like the energy comes from somewhere, you know? It's almost like I forget that constant fatigue is there or joint pain or whatever I'm facing each day.
And I suppose also just spending so much time in nature, in the sun, in the field with the beautiful views and the fresh air, like it all helps.
Oh, absolutely. I used to be a wilderness therapy guide for people with terminal illness, and it's an extremely healing and peaceful place. One thing I really love doing is going into the mountains and taking my paddleboard and going camping like on an alpine lake for a couple of nights. And so I'll have some of those small adventures this summer, but I'm not sure what my next big one is yet.
Risa, where are you most active on social media? Where can people find out more about you, about your books, about your adventures, about your life?
I'm on Instagram at Risa Unleashed, as well as Facebook at Risa Unleashed. And my book is available on Amazon. And I also have an author page on my website, risaaugust.com. That's RISA August, just like the month.com. My author page has a whole list of other options for purchasing if you choose not to or don't want to purchase through Amazon.
Risa, I'd love for you to share your final words of advice, final words of wisdom for other women out there who are going through a tough time at the moment, or they want to spend more time in the outdoors, want to go on more adventures, they want to say yes to new challenges. What advice would you like to share? But please don't say, just do it. Any other advice?
Sure. Yes. When you're in those moments of feeling stuck or, struggling with like limiting thoughts or beliefs, ask yourself, what can I do? And so I've taken the word can and I've turned it into a mantra, capable, able, now. And I've taken the word can, capable, able, now. And I ask myself, what am I capable and able to do now in this moment? What can I do? And if you're like, well, I want to climb Mount Everest, and well, ask yourself, well, what is one step in this moment I can take towards that? What am I capable and able to do now towards that? So like, for example, I started painting and eventually it turned into a 1,845-mile journey. So ask yourself, what can I do? And it doesn't have to be an 1,800-mile journey. It could be taking that cooking class you always wanted to take, or that trip to Greece you've always wanted to go on, or it could be anything. You have more power over your thoughts than you might believe. So ask yourself, what can I do? What am I capable and able to do now in this moment?
Absolutely. What can I do? And part of me just wants to say, book that dominatrix course. Oh,
yes.
Do it. Try something new. Risa, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. It's been incredible to catch up with you. It's been incredible to speak to you, learn more about your story, learn more about your book, The Road Unpaved.
Oh, I'm so appreciative. Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me. It's been wonderful.
Hey tribe, how are you all doing? Especially those people in the UK. How are you coping with the cold? OMG. I'm definitely not coping that well. I am not a fan of the cold and the dark and the winter months, but it is what it is. Thanks so much for listening to the Tough Girl Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. Everything that we have talked about today will be available in the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com. So please do go and check it out. New episodes of the Tough Girl Podcast go live every Tuesday. I'm just going to give you a quick heads up of who we have coming on the podcast next Tuesday. So I am absolutely delighted to share that we are actually doing a Tough Girl podcast extra. So previously we've spoken with Jen Scotney before, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of her bio. So Jen Scotney boasts an impressive record as an ultra runner with podium finishes in the 108-mile Montaigne Winter Spine Challenger South and the 190-mile Northern Traverse. She's the host of the Resilience Rising podcast, a running coach, writer, mountain leader, and yoga teacher, which have followed her career as a human rights lawyer. She has appeared in magazine features for Runner's World, trail running, and women's running. She has been a guest host on Wild Ginger Running YouTube channel and a previous guest on the Tough Girl podcast. Whoop, whoop. She crewed for John Kelly's successful Pennine Way fastest known time, as well as for his Wainwright's round in the Lake District. She grew up in the Peak District and now lives in the Scottish mountains with her husband Marcus and Sherlock the Beagle. Running Through the Dark is her first book. So we spoke to Jen about 6 years ago, back in 2018. And so we're doing a proper catch up because a lot has changed for Jen. It's an absolutely cracking episode. And if you listened to that episode ages ago, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that first episode that we did with Jen back in 2018. Listen to it before you listen to the next episode, which is coming out next Tuesday. Running Through the Dark is her first book. We do touch on a lot of those topics. Huge amounts of changes. Really, really fascinating. I think you'll definitely enjoy it. Big shout out to everybody who's going after their goals this week, today, tomorrow, who's setting the alarm, who's getting out of bed, doing what needs to be done, building the momentum, creating the good habits. I'm very proud of you, each and every one of you, because sometimes people do not get told how well they are doing. So I just want to let you know that you're doing a really, really good job. What else do I need to share with you all? Yep, we've just got great episodes coming out throughout November and December. I'm going to try and sneak in a few extra episodes, a few Tough Girl extra episodes. And these are bonus episodes which go live on a Thursday. I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm going to try my best. But currently I am editing like crazy. So I'm editing not only the podcast episodes, but I'm also editing the YouTube vlog. So last year I walked the Te Araroa Trail in New Zealand. So 3,000 kilometers from the top of the North Island to Bluff in the bottom of the South Island. Those vlogs are coming out now. So they're going to be replicating, basically, it's almost like a year delay when they're going to be coming out, but they'll be coming out roughly the same date as I did the walk last year. And it's just, to be honest, it's just how the cookies crumbled. I've been on so many walks and haven't been, didn't have the energy when I was back home, because I was like, I couldn't work out if I was being lazy or tired, and it turned out I was neither. I was severely anemic, but luckily that has been sorted, so I've got my energy back, so I'm back to editing. So if you haven't checked out any of my vlogs, you're completely new to the Tough Girl podcast, you're probably wondering, what is she even talking about? Then I'd encourage you to check out the Tough Girl YouTube channel. There are vlogs from my Wales coast path, their Cotswold Way, coast to coast, Offa's Dyke, the Camino Francis, the Camino Portuguese. So I do like a very sort of vloggy style, just sort of showing you the realities of what it's like on the trail, what it's like doing these adventures and journeys. And I think the New Zealand vlogs are definitely going to reflect that. Thank you again to all of the incredible patrons out there supporting the work that I do, supporting the mission with the Tough Girl podcast. It really does mean the world to me to have you here, to have you supporting. Jennifer King, Jessica Hepburn, Jim Laudolph, Laudolff, got Joss Berman, got Julia Robson, we've got JT Thorstand, Joanna Donkin, we've got Catherine Knight, Julia Tratt, Carrie Flockhart, Kristen Bro, Kirsten Palmer, Laura Zane, Laura Beth Morton, Leah Atherton, Lindsay Nesbitt, Lizzie Varley, Lottie Newell Smith, Blue D, Margaret Oliver, Mike Gray. Hi, Mike. How you doing? You've been a long time supporter. I really do appreciate it. Monica Boland, Natasha Furnez, Patsy Lamb, Sal Thornton, Sally Clements, Sarah Bright, Sarah Towers, Sarah Tudlow, Shauna Fallon. Thank you so much. Like, it really does make the world of difference having your support. If you'd like to get involved with the Tough Girl podcast, if you'd like to pay it forward and you're not sure what to do, if you have a spare $5, $20, $25 a month available, I say dollars, but actually you can pay in sterling, US dollars, you can pay in any any currency, I believe now, because Patreon has evolved a lot since it's first started. So you should be able to pay in your currency, whatever works best for you. But if you visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast, you can sign up as a patron. If financially you're not in the best place at the moment, don't worry, don't stress. What would be amazing is if you could tell one friend about the Tough Girl Podcast, if you could share it with them, send it to them via WhatsApp, show them how to listen to a podcast, send it to them via email. That would be amazing, especially if they're training for a new race at the moment, if they're training for a marathon or they're taking on a new challenge, or maybe they're just in a little bit of a rut and they need something to shake them out of it, or they just need to hear something different and they need some different type of inspiration, then the Tough Girl Podcast can provide it. There's over 700 episodes for you to choose from. There's a massive back catalogue of women, so much so that, you know, I'm struggling to keep track of all of the women that I've interviewed, because not only is it the back catalogue, but because I'm also interviewing like sometimes 3, 4, 5 months in advance. I've got future episodes in as well. And then I come across so many incredible women on social media. I'm like, I must speak to them. I must speak to them. So they go on to like sort of my waiting list. If you want to learn more about me and my background, then please do visit toughgirlchallenges.com. But thank you again for listening. I really do appreciate it. And all that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all. Give it 110%. Get after it. Go for it. Believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care. Lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon.